So, so for today, I really wanted to focus and talk about product market fit and really kind of geared around how using market research to better have your product fit the market and create a differentiation in the market from being just another.
Okay. All right. Because differentiation, first of all, let's make sure we understand what differentiation is, the value of that. Is that if you're doing the exact same thing as another company, odds are we don't need one of the two of you.
Yeah.
And so differentiation gives you the ability to possibly do the same thing, but do it in such a way that it is perceived as being very, very different. And so therefore there's room for more than one.
Well, or to another point, which I think you kind of brought up in one of our other conversations recently, which was if you both are the same thing, which is closer or which is cheaper becomes the two questions.
Correct.
When you're able to differentiate yourself, someone will drive 30 minutes to come to your location because they view it as not the same as the one in their backyard.
Correct.
Even though it may be more or less the same thing.
Same thing.
But yeah, so I mean, how does market research fit into that?
Right. So the problem again that we talk about all the time and we keep going back and around about is that businesses before you get all excited about advertising and everything else, you need to spend time doing market research. And you need to know who your customer is. Because if you understand who your customer is, a lot of times you can sell the exact same thing to a very different group of people and get a very different price, higher or lower, and the volume can be way different. Even though it's the exact same product, we put it in a different type of bag, we put it in a different box.
You highlight a different feature.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's worth a whole lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think of somebody like, there's costume rental places around.
Sure.
If you can rent costumes. But there's also Party City.
Yep.
And Party City has a very specific demographic they're going after and a very specific price point.
Yep.
So if you look at costumes in Party City, there's a very, very definite price point. And some around, I think it was around $35, $45.
Sounds about right. But I mean, it's not for rent either. I mean, you own it.
But you go to a costume rental place and you're looking at $45 to $100 to rent the same thing.
And to rent it. But and it's nicer though. I will say it's usually nicer quality.
It's better quality.
Better. It's more built for longevity, not a one night and done.
Correct. It's built for longevity. But you're going to pay more than what you would there. So, the question is what do you want to come at? Right? Do you want just a cheap costume to have a costume on, right?
Sure.
Or do you want something that looks like you own this and you do this all the time?
Right.
When you show up to your event. And those are two very different groups of people.
Yeah.
With very different goals.
I mean, I think a better example would be a Halloween store.
Yes.
I don't remember if it's Halloween City or Halloween Town, but the Halloween stores that pop up for the Halloween season only.
Yes.
And costume stores would be a better comparison example. One, you're going to spend $50 to buy the outfit. The other one, you're going to spend $50 to $100 to just borrow the outfit. Very different demographics, psychographically speaking, from each other.
Yes. Very different psychographics because they have very different goals. And thus, you have differentiated yourself.
I mean, I think that's good. I mean, what I'm thinking of more, though, is companies who have used market research to change their approach.
Right.
In a positive way.
Right.
I think of the Chevy truck, right, which the Car Guys and Bean Counter books talks about as having done a good job because they did go to the market and they did go, hey, what is it you value? What is it you care about? And then they made those tweaks in the truck design and the way the truck was utilized to be able to build a superior truck to its competition. I mean, there's a reason why the Chevy Silverado is like one of the only things Chevy that you see everywhere on the road.
Correct.
I mean, if we're real, you do not see Chevy's cars. You see some of their SUVs, but their Silverado is by far they're synonymous to them, and everyone knows the Silverado as a Chevy car.
Yes, and they buy reports to find out what other people are doing, and they do surveys to find out what customers really want.
Yeah.
And thus, they make a truck to a customer. Unlike the rest of Chevy, which has been following GM's policy of we want to reuse parts, we want to
Yep.
find a way to make cars cheaper, rather than going out and finding out who is our market,
Yeah.
who buys Chevy, and then let's sell to that market.
But I think that's a better point. You know, is it's about understanding your customer and what they want, and then making your product match that.
Correct.
Right? It's not about saying, here's my product world, buy my product because it's the greatest whatever. It's going, hey, what is it that you care about? You know, another example that's in that book that I really liked was they talked about the one company who was selling 6 different items to Chevy that were all the exact same item. And what I thought was interesting is that they did talk about how they highlighted different elements of the same item to create the different price points.
Mhm.
So you may highlight the fact that this one is, you know, and this isn't in the book, but I'm just giving an example, but they might highlight the fact that this one is, you know, extra thick, durable steel, or this one is American steel, or this one is, you know, whatever. And it can be the exact same part, but you're highlighting different things that create a different perceived value in the consumer's mind.
Correct.
And that's really important in differentiation, you know, and I mean, it's something I've seen throughout in the industries is companies will use certain key points that people don't think about highlighting, and they'll highlight that as we're a premium, right? Like, think about the person who comes and picks up your old stuff for junk haulers.
All right.
There's a perceived notion that most junk haulers are just guys with a truck that want to make some extra cash.
Right.
So how can you give a premium vibe, even if you're doing what every other high-end junk haulers do?
Correct.
You talk about the boot covers you wear. You talk about the padding you put around the furniture as you're taking it out. You talk about the gloves that your employees wear. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
You talk about these things that every other major junk hauler does, but they're not promoting it. And therefore you differentiate yourself as the company who does the extra care, even if everyone else doesn't.
Right.
I think of T-Mobile, who's more or less done that to a degree, or Delta Airlines has done that in the past. And let's be real, Delta Airlines and Alaska Airlines, I know you, I think you've flown on both at
I've
this
flown
point.
both. I've flown both.
I've flown both multiple times. And I can tell you, Delta will highlight theirs as like this superior business-like experience. Now, I've not done first class for either, but at least from the coach section, like, they're both the same. There is not a better or worse experience, one or the other.
Correct.
But Delta does a really great job of trying to showcase that theirs is wider seat, try to showcase that theirs is more comfortable, that theirs is etc. But it's not that they are better than the others. It's just, right? It's literally just the fact that they are promoting that to create that mindset.
Yes. And they are attracting a specific type of customer for that. You know, they want the business travel, unlike Southwest, who wants the everyday Joe that wants a discount ticket.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing I think about as well is like for a lot of the CPG goods, think about the grocery store.
I hate to think about the grocery store.
But I mean, think about how many different variations there are on the exact same thing.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't like to think about it. It's grocery store is a tough place. I mean, shelf space is expensive, and
But not only is it expensive, but think about how often have you bought a different brand than what you always buy?
well, that's the goal of every brand is to be the brand that everybody just buys because of who they
But I'm
are.
saying, like, when you buy salad dressing, you buy the exact same brand of salad dressing every single time. Do you even look at all the other brands available that offer French dressing
Yes,
or
I
ranch
do.
dressing?
Yes, I do.
How often do you actually consider buying them, though?
Every time, I do.
Okay.
I'm the oddball. But, yeah, so the number of SKUs or different products in um, the grocery store is just ridiculous. I mean, I think they have like typically a store on the low end is 2,000 to 4,000 different SKUs.
Sounds right.
And that's just a lot of products, and there's a lot of duplication. And I think of Aldi's. Remember
Yep.
Aldi's? We have potato chips. We have Ruffle potato chips. We have one brand of Ruffle potato chips. We have Aldi Ruffle potato chips, and that's it.
Yep.
We don't have Lay's. We don't have all these other things. We have just
Simple
one brand, our brand, and that's it. The only thing we carry in our store, and they've done very well with that.
Yep.
By reducing the number of SKUs, where in the grocery store everybody's fighting for that shelf space. I want to have more shelf space. Doesn't have more shelf space, you have to move more.
Yep.
And show me that you can empty the shelf of your product.
Yep.
So what do you end up doing? You end up giving discounts, you end up running commercials, you end up all kinds of things to stay on that shelf.
Right, but my point is that without differentiation, you're just another
Exactly.
thing. And
exactly.
so
you're just another product on the shelf.
and I'll give you a quick easy example in the grocery specifically that I had on LinkedIn come across that was really interesting. Salad.
Okay, salad.
It's all over the place, right? Pretty much every grocery store has pre-cut salad.
Correct.
Right? Pre-cut, your whatever's in the salad. The thing that people on this LinkedIn thread post, right, found most valuable was how was it being washed 3 times specifically before being packaged. That's what they cared about more than anything else. They didn't care about what was in it so much, right? Because it's all kind of similar enough. They didn't look at the nutrients. What they care about is, was it washed or not washed? Do I have to go home and worry about washing it? Or can I just take it out right now and eat it and feel safe and comfortable that it's been washed properly? And that's all that they care about. And it was interesting to me because I was going like literally a commercial talking about how you wash your lettuce to ensure that it's always like perfectly ready to be eaten is more valuable for one of those brands than them focusing on the taste, the nutrients, or anything else.
Or the mix.
Yes. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, that's a reality, right? Like, is they're further ahead focusing on, hey, we wash ours really well. Even if every single one of those companies washes theirs really well, if you can make an ad campaign that promotes how well you wash yours, people will buy yours because they associate as being safe and clean and healthy over every other brand.
Yeah.
And I just was like, where's the product market fit research being done to have this conversation to realize like, oh, we're focusing on the wrong crap.
Right.
We shouldn't be focusing on this or that. We should be focusing on that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And it's those little things that what we're really talking about when you talk about product market fit is what are those little things that are the differentiators or
That matter.
or the thing that makes us a buy.
Yeah.
And the problem is so often business owners struggle to find somebody to buy it. And they're just thrilled that somebody bought it.
Yep.
And then they get into a situation where they're supplying maybe a grocery store or whatever.
Yep.
And they're just thrilled that, this store has us on the shelf. And they never take that next step of going that extra mile to find out, okay, now who's buying this?
Yep.
And what do they really care about? Because if you knew, you could take over the market space. I mean, all you do is put washed 3 times in big letters,
yep.
a little sticker
yep.
on your stuff. And, you're golden.
Or to your point, or understand why people don't buy and aren't buying it to understand how to adjust your product / messaging to meet where people are at.
Correct.
Because the other issue I see that I personally find really frustrating with a lot of businesses I run into is a lot of them want to focus on the current market demand and go, these are the people who bought from us. Well, I'm glad they bought from you. You're not going to grow and scale to a massive size if you don't understand why people didn't buy, why people weren't interested.
Right.
Explain to me why people didn't buy and why people weren't interested, And I, as a marketer, become really excited because now it becomes we can either adjust the product or we can adjust the messaging to meet this whole untapped market,
Right.
which is way easier, way more powerful, and better as a differentiator than going after the same market demand. If you already have people looking for X and we're a slightly better X than the competitor, that's not going to be compelling enough for them to buy our product over the competitor, most likely, right? It's very rare. There's a good enough level. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
There's a good enough level. I'll use another great example of good enough to my point that I'm trying to get at. Wireless earbuds, wireless headphones.
Okay. All right. Apple started it.
But
Horribly expensive.
tech space even, right? Phones, smartphones.
Yep.
In the last 3 to 5 years, all of that realm of stuff, of the personal tech realm, headphones, earbuds, and smartphones, has basically dried up on innovation.
Correct.
Year over year, it's slightly better, but it's so slightly. I mean, like I'll give you a great example for one, a brand I followed for years now. Sony's WFX brand, right? Their
Okay.
1000 brand. They're on their version 5 version, okay? Version 3 to version 4 to version 5, the difference is like 30 minutes of playtime or an hour of playtime. Like like that's the difference. Because you can't make the speaker any better for it to matter.
Well,
right?
you also can't make the
And
battery
you can't
smaller.
make it smaller because there's just the science isn't there to make anything smaller.
Correct.
So you're stuck with literally the same thing, but it's a new year and it's slightly improved. Same thing with a lot of the smartphones. You look at the Samsung S22 Ultra, the Samsung S23 Ultra, even the Note 22 Ultra. You look at iPhones, 13, 14, and 15.
Mhm.
They're all basically the same thing.
Correct. Because the technology has hit
A
a
wall
wall.
to where it's slightly better isn't enough for me to need to buy slightly better.
Right. And that's where PCs got
But
a number of years ago.
absolutely.
Is they got to the place where they did everything everybody wanted as fast as they needed.
And
so they had to come up with a new use case.
Well, you have to create a new need.
Right.
And that's why to me that product market fit of like understanding what the market needs and understanding what they really care about is so valuable because too often people worry about this like, oh, we're another this, that's better. Or we're better at that. And that's not differentiation in my opinion. Being slightly better, right, is not differentiation enough to get a market.
In some cases it is, but in most cases it's fanciful dream.
All right, I'll give you a great example. i5 versus i7. Back in the day when those two came out, right, when they had the i5 and the i7, was the i7 needed by the majority of the U.S. population?
Now the i7 was when they went to the larger phone, right?
No, I'm talking about the computers.
Oh,
In computers, when they had the i5, because it was i3 and
Processors.
i5 for the longest, right? And then they went i5 and i7 processors.
Right.
The i7 processor, I remember back in the day when I was looking at, was only needed if you were a gamer or if you were into like some really high-end artistic stuff, right? If you're doing like Adobe Photoshop, you wanted the i7.
Right.
But otherwise, it was completely unnecessary. Because, I mean, students were buying the i5 all the time, which has now turned into the Chromebooks, right? Students now buy the Chromebooks because you don't need the i7.
Right.
I say all that to say, like, product market fit is about understanding that slightly better isn't always better in people's minds. I know you were going to give an example, and I'll let you give your example of where it is better, but I just think most of the time it's not. Slightly better isn't good enough.
Well, what I'm saying is there are times where slightly better actually fits the need better.
Okay.
And that's where to get back to product market fit is sometimes a company is number one in an area and they are the company to buy from. And somebody comes out with something that's just a little bit different. Does the same thing, but it's just a little bit different, but it happens to fit the need.
Can you think of anything like that in the software space that you've experienced or dealt with?
I've been trying to think all morning of an example. I know there's some examples, but there's a lot of times where oftentimes a company can get a leg up because they actually understand the customer better than the market leader. And the market leader has got their nose up in the air.
Yeah.
We're the market leader. Everybody buys ours. We're all that matters. And as long as we're the market leader, we don't have to worry about anybody else because we're the market
I mean, that
leader.
would kind of be like IBM and Dell, though, right?
Yeah.
Because IBM held the PC industry for
Well, they held
what,
the PC industry for a
30
while,
years?
but they held the computer industry as a whole for the longest time. And then eventually PCs got fast enough and had enough capacity that they started
Well,
replacing their mainframe.
let me ask you, because you've worked in the B2B space and in the software space. What caused Dell, and when was Dell's big from your experience, right? And this would be in Georgia, I guess, right, predominantly. But when did you see Dell take over IBM's computers in the workforce? Like, when did they start eliminating? Because I know IBM held the B2B. Like, if you had a business and you had a computer, it was most likely an IBM for a very, very long time.
Well,
And then Dell has since taken over that market. And nowadays, it's almost, if you don't have a Dell computer as a business, it's very rare.
right, and there's not IBM computers in.
Yeah.
So two things happened to IBM. Number one, the cost of PCs went down.
Okay.
Okay, so it no longer met their business model because they had a very heavy business model.
Okay.
All right, so their business model was to sell to the bank, to sell to the Fortune 50,
Okay.
maybe the Fortune 500,
Okay.
and that was their market space.
But top echelon
Yes.
levels.
Yes. I mean, if you're not a $150 million company, you really can't afford IBM.
Okay.
All right. They tried to push below that, and it became something where they just, price-wise, they just couldn't compete.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons that they're shrinking in size and struggling right now, is because the market for the high-end computers, the problem is you can buy something at half the price, a quarter the price, that does the same thing. And that was their problem, is that what was innovative 10 years ago isn't innovative anymore.
Yep.
And where things are innovating, the cost is so low that you can't pay the $200, $300 an hour that they're charging people for their.
So how did Dell get away with that?
Well, Dell came in and, first of all, paid people less.
Okay.
But they also went to economies of scale, things like building motherboards in China and things like that to reduce costs.
So they met that transition quickly.
Correct. Well, Dell was focused on consumer PC.
Oh,
Okay?
really? I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. Because they're so heavily known for B2B nowadays. I
Exactly.
didn't realize they were ever in the consumer
No,
market.
they were initially the consumer market. All they wanted. They let IBM take their IBM PC and sell all of the banks and all of the everything, and all they did was consumer.
Okay.
But guess what? If you work in a bank, what PC you ended up having at home eventually?
Well, Dell then, I would assume.
Exactly. You started with an IBM because it was cool, because you got it through work, and they would sell them to the executives, right?
Sure.
But eventually you had people who went to school, college, who had a Dell, who, when they moved up and they got offered an IBM, they said, well, that's fine. I have my Dell.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Right.
And so eventually those people became the decision makers, as well as costs. You know, cutting costs is always a thing. And so as you're looking to cut costs, I can buy a Dell for this, and I can get it made exactly to our specifications, you know, what everything we need. So now we can have a whole bunch of computers that are exactly the same, where when you ordered from IBM, it was a matter of who you were and how important you were to IBM as to whether you got your PC.
Gotcha.
So there was a long time that you bought a lot and you bought maybe 100 PCs, but the guy next door is buying 1,000.
Right.
Okay? Well, they'll cannibalize your 100 PCs
Right.
and give them to the guy who's buying 1,000 because they need to get his 1,000 out on time.
Right.
And your 100, you know, gets put off till next month, next quarter, next.
So at what point did Dell become a superior computer to get into the Fortune 500 companies, or what happened that got them to eliminate IBM in existence?
Well, part of it was they delivered.
Okay.
You ordered it, they delivered.
And that wasn't something IBM did, or?
IBM struggled with that because they never wanted to stock PCs or stock parts. See, Dell had the retail piece,
Right.
right? And retail people, you can kind of go in and out on them. And if you bought too much, you just have a sale on the retail side, right, to get
Yep.
rid of the overstock. So you could have somebody say, I'm thinking about 1,000 PC order, and you can buy motherboards for 1,000 PCs. If that order falls through, you've got retail.
Okay, gotcha.
Where IBM is buying a lot, literally, we have orders for 10,000 PCs, so we need to order 10,000 PCs, and they're going to come in these,
Gotcha.
1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever,
Right.
lots from our
Okay.
manufacturer. And so they were always locked into this thing of having to buy large enough lots to where they could get the lowest price. And so you had to wait till your queue filled, and then you had to place this order, and then you couldn't buy extra.
So there was a delivery time delay. So I'm hearing there's delivery time delay, and there was a
Internal order delay.
there was a delay on, like, as far as from the end user, right? Dell had the advantage of I order it, I get it, in a much shorter time period than IBM.
Correct. I
Number
I
one.
can get it today, get it tomorrow.
Number
Or
two,
we're out of that motherboard. We can give you this other motherboard, though, that's like this.
well, number two, I was going to say it sounds like Dell was easier to adjust things with, whereas IBM, you bought it, you're stuck with it. There's no upgrades, there's no changes, you're just kind of stuck with whatever you bought.
Correct.
And it sounds like those were two very big things that affected the PC culture.
At that time, yes.
And then so that's how Dell took over ultimately, was they just were able to be faster on getting you what you wanted, and they were more flexible and be able to adjust it. And so that allowed you as a business owner to transition.
Correct.
So which did you have then when you started out? Did you start out with an IBM for your first job? Do you remember? Because your first programming job was in the 80s, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we had an IBM, but we ended up with the clones pretty quickly because IBM didn't want to sell their computers. I mean, they were selling them. People were selling them at like a 2% margin. It was insane.
Okay.
Can you imagine buying a $4,000 computer and making 2% on $4,000? That's $400. So the idea was that you made all the money on the services that you sold on the back end of selling the computer, all the other software that they needed.
So for IBM's resellers, you had to make your money on the back end services. So if you weren't an IT, what we would consider like a nerd company or an IT company today,
yeah.
if you weren't that first, you didn't actually make money.
Correct.
And
So you made money on the consulting, you made money on software, and then eventually enough people bought them and people knew enough about them that all you had to do was make the software. But at the same time, the margin for PCs went up to 10 or I think 10% was the top I've ever was aware of. Maybe they got it.
And then so when you worked for Joel, were you using a Dell at that time?
No.
No? Okay. So you've never used a Dell?
For the most part, no.
Business-wise?
No.
That's interesting.
No. Okay. No, he wasn't into fancy stuff. He was interested in, they had a supplier that built up PCs.
Yeah.
In fact, they even built PCs themselves. And, they got a built-up system from a local.
Well, so I want to use Joel real quick as an example, because I think he's a cool example of product market fit done right.
Okay.
What did you, because your software wasn't unique, you guys were selling, correct?
Yeah, it was.
What was, right, but I'm saying there were other companies that offered something of a similar-ish nature out there. It wasn't the first of its kind.
No, you had three options.
Right.
You had Pitney Bowes.
Okay.
You had a company that was later acquired by the company that acquired Joel's company. And you had JoelSoft.
Right.
Those are only three. That's all there was.
So what made Joel's software, because you worked for Joel's company and then you worked for the company that bought him out for a period of time period. What was the difference in the way Joel sold it or the way Joel interacted with his clients versus the other company that made it so much better?
Okay, so what he did is his whole thing was, what do you need it to do? And then what does it take to do that? And then his pricing was always 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
So you will get your money back based on the number of people that we're going to save you in labor
Right.
in 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
So it's the mistakes in your accounting that are being made because you've got people manually entering all these orders in. It's the mistakes in getting things out the door to the right address that happen because of,
The manual entries. Yep.
right. And then eventually UPS moved into that state.
So how did, when his
FedEx.
company got acquired, how did that change?
How it changed was they went from a 6 to 12 months to, well, we have to have fixed prices across the board. Because he would literally sell the same software, same computer for $15,000 to one person.
Yep.
And $50,000 to another.
Okay.
Now the difference between the two was customization to their specific software, their specific situation. But the ROI was always 6 to 12 months. And this other company that bought them was a British company.
Yep.
And they could not comprehend the concept that different people would pay different prices for the exact same
So that
software.
price elasticity of changing your price per the consumer was just foreign to them.
Correct.
And they couldn't comprehend that.
Right.
And so they create a fixed pricing saying everyone should buy at this price.
Yep. And this should be X amount. And the problem is that that's not the real world. That's not what people really wanted. What people wanted was a 6 to 12 month ROI. And if you can guarantee me a 6 to 12 month ROI and you can show me in numbers how I get that, I'm happy. Because how many things can you buy as a business owner and get your money back in 6 to 12 months?
Yeah.
Very, very few.
Right. And very few will adjust the pricing to meet that.
Like we were talking about the other day about the automation of food prep.
Yep.
That they're trying to do that's not working very well right now in the restaurant industry. You know, nobody sat down and promised
The ROI is not really being looked at properly.
Yeah, nobody's promising them, hey, we will save you in 6
Well, they're
months.
promising that, but they haven't been able to fulfill on that, which is two different things.
Yeah.
It's one thing to promise, right? And I think we talk about this a lot, and I just want to throw this out there because it's so big to me. It's one thing in marketing to make a promise. If your company can't fulfill that promise through the operations, then I literally am wasting my time and money and energy on anything to do with it.
Exactly.
Which happens way too often.
And Joel fulfilled always on a promise. You know, 6 to 12 months. And it was such a weird thing is that it was like if somebody left the company, that was a good thing. That was advertising.
Really?
Because that meant that wherever they went, they were going to actually sell one of his systems for him. Because again, they saw error rates drop, which is a huge cost. They saw the labor savings, and they could attest to that. And then you take that executive in charge of shipping and move into another company in charge of shipping and say, hey, we've got a whole mess here. I know somebody who can.
Right. But it sounds like it was having a software that A, did the job it was supposed to do, but then B, as a salesperson, understanding what the ROI was and adjusting your pricing and your offerings to meet that ROI.
Correct.
And that sounds like that was the real focus, was people wanted that customization to where I'm always getting my ROI in 12 months.
Exactly.
And that's the difference between why he was so successful and the company that bought them struggling the way that they did afterwards.
Yes. They took a $20 million VAR channel and turned it into an $8 million company.
Yeah. And it was just due to eliminating that, worrying about what businesses, I mean, let's be real, businesses, one of the things they care about most is their money.
Yeah.
Like, if you can save me money, I'm interested, possibly.
Right.
If you can't,
Exactly.
like I better be having a problem that's a serious problem that you're able to point out and be able to get me to be like, yeah, I need to do that today.
Yeah. Or like, for
But it's
instance,
very
I had a install I did towards the end of my time with him for a company, and Joel said to me, hey, look, we sold it for $15,000 to this customer. You know, now this is like a $12,000 deal.
Yeah.
Because the prices of various things have come down. but they're perfectly fine with paying 15,000 because that's what they paid last time and they got their money out of it.
Yep.
So they want it again.
Yeah.
And they're fine with that. They don't care what the software costs. They don't care what the hardware costs. They don't care what the real implementation cost is. What they know is that if I paid $15,000, I got my $15,000 back and more. I'll spend that all day long, and I won't even think twice. I don't care, what the back end issues are.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that again, that goes back into why it's so valuable and important to have this whole like mindset of how are we meeting what the market cares about,
Exactly, and this is where
right? Or understanding what they don't care about.
Right, and this is where businesses lose money, just like all over the place. Is that they could have charged more, or they could have gotten into other markets,
or they could have done less,
but the thing is, they because they don't really know how their offering fits into a particular market, we're just trying to sell it.
Yeah.
And then once you sell it, well, we sold it, so we succeeded, right? Everything's fine, and there's a whole nother iteration that you need to go through to really figure out what's really going on so that you can actually have a business that's going to last.
Well, there's that. There's also just like, to me, the product market fit, it's understanding why didn't someone buy versus just like they're not our customer.
Right.
Well, there's so many businesses that are quick to be like, oh, they're not my customer. Well, that's great. They're not your customer, but why aren't they your customer? Because from a marketing perspective, how can I tailor a message that grows your business if all I am is telling everyone in this market that you're the same as everyone else that they've already heard, right?
Right.
Like, I need to know how I can differentiate you through message or through actual product changes to be able to have something that brings in a market that we don't already bring in naturally.
Right. But that's the challenge. That's the tough part. Is that there are some people who are not your customer. You don't want to sell to them.
Sure.
You don't want them to buy what you sell.
Sure.
Okay. But there's a lot of people that would buy what you sell if you explained it to them.
Yeah.
If you talked about it differently, if they knew that you existed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking about, what was it last night? Survivor. Survivor's been running for, how long do we figure?
23 years.
23 years.
44 seasons now.
44 seasons.
Or something like that.
43, 44 seasons, something like that. 23 years. And there's still people who have never seen it.
Yeah.
If you can imagine something, like that. Right? And I get it. I totally get it. I've got a number of shows that I've never watched
I think
or don't care to watch.
What's also scary is how many of the people that are on the show now are people who they're like, oh, I was 8 years old when I watched it, and I started watching every season, and I can't believe I'm on the show now. I mean, they have people like that, and it's wild to think about a show being around that long.
That long, yeah. And yet you have the other alternative of people who have never seen it, and there's some people who probably shouldn't watch it.
Yeah.
It's just not
their cup of tea. Yeah. Absolutely.
But if you knew why people watched it, then you could go out and find other people.
Well, but also if you knew why people didn't watch it, you could see whether there's a chance to bring them in the fold. I'll give you a great example, okay?
Okay.
I'll give you a great example of what I'm talking about. And huge thing, I think, when it comes to a lot of stuff. I got the chance to visit Hopscotch recently, which is a downtown immersive art experience kind of place. Really, really cool place. Can't praise them enough. They bring in, from what I could see, 3 to 4 groups of people that you could say that are very different groups that don't belong with each other.
Okay.
One is the art lover, right?
Okay.
The person who just legit appreciates and values art.
Okay.
And they have certain rooms and sections that are purely for art, right? And an artist would love.
Mm-hmm.
Someone like me, I got the chance to get the VIP tour. So therefore I was able to hear the backstories and stuff, and that was really fun. So I kind of got a little bit enjoyment out of that part. But for a lot of people like me, you would go there and be like, okay, cool, it's a big mural. Okay, cool. Right? Not a huge thing. They had other rooms that were interactive rooms. So they have like a trampoline room where as you bounce, like the lights on the trampoline will adjust, right? So it looks like you're like, like you'll bounce and then there'll be like a little like white puddle, for lack of a better term, around where you bounce, right?
Okay.
Kind of thing. Really, some really cool stuff like that. They have another room where they give you this spray paint laser can, and you can spray paint on the wall whatever you want to spray paint on the wall, and it's all digitalized. Um, so one group's like your art appreciative, right? Your artists. The other group is your families, because there's a lot of interactive stuff for kids to be able to kind of like just do fun stuff.
Okay.
Another group that you get is your social media wannabes or influencer wannabes, who want to take the pictures at the cool spot that, I mean, like, there's nothing else in the world like what they've created. There's something similar, but they're in Vegas, San Francisco, Dallas, and big giant cities. There's nothing anywhere around in Oregon like what they created. So there's a very big, like, this is really cool, like, social media influencer experience. And then, so those are like the three main groups that they get. And then they have like the fourth group a little bit, which is just like the tech appreciative people. Because there's so much tech in everything that they have that you kind of have to appreciate the level of software and tech that they're utilizing.
Okay.
Like, I'll give you one of the rooms they have is they have this one room where you step on the platform and they basically build a software that has on the screen in front of you, it take your image, transpose it on the screen, and then on the screen it has you dancing to the music that's playing. So you can be staying still and it'll still have you moving, right? And it's just like a really cool, like, live real kind of, like, it's like a filter from like these social media apps, but all live. You get to watch it all live. Like, just very cool stuff. So like the tech enthusiasts. So they bring all four of those people to the exact same location and they all love it and appreciate it.
Mhm.
But that's because they specifically have built different rooms for different tastes, number one. Number two, it's because of the fact that they've created very consciously on how can we bring the most amount of people to have an experience that they all enjoy. And to me, like, that's smart product market fit, because it's appealing to as large of an audience as possible by having elements that each of those would like, having the beautiful images that the influencer would want to take pictures with, having the the murals that a true artist would want to like partake in, having the bouncy house or the ball pit the kids would want to play in, right? Being able to have like all the tech related stuff, right? That a tech geek would nerd out on. Like, that's to me like what makes it such an amazing place. Is they're able to pull from a much wider demographic than if they just appeal to one of those individual segments. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's one way. What I'm thinking more of is there's a lot of people that would buy what you're selling, but for whatever reason don't see a value in it.
Yeah.
So some of that's education. Some of that is just finding and letting them know.
Yeah.
And it
Absolutely.
just
I mean,
varies.
like washing your lettuce 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. It varies all over the board, but you can only do that if you do sit down and do the market research. Yes, we're having success. Let's do some market research and let's look at what's really possible.
Right.
And I think that's one of those places where people, if they would go back and do the product market fit, they would realize that either there's a much bigger market or they're expending huge amounts of energy to sell something that a sticker that says washed 3 times would take care of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen that in the software space quite a bit, though, where companies are buying something for an entirely different reason than what's being advertised.
Yeah, well, that's pretty normal. That's kind
Well,
of,
I mean, I think you would agree with me with SAP was like that to a degree. People bought it because of like it was what the big guys were using, almost as much as they bought it because they thought it would add value to them.
correct.
I mean,
Correct. That
just
was
knowing that the
50.
Fortune 500 companies were like, this was the Fortune 500 company, tool that I can afford,
Right.
was like, oh, well.
Correct. Correct. And for a lot of people, that was 50% of the sale.
I mean, it's that esteem effect of
Yes.
like, I'm like the big guy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's understanding those kind of things that the product market fit just becomes so much more valuable. And that's also why, I just want to say, like, this is also why I'm such a big believer of, I love surveys. Like, surveys are great, but I think an in-person conversation is worth 20 surveys to 100 surveys.
Yes, definitely.
Like, one just actual live conversation with someone is so much more valuable than just having a survey that people fill out. Because you don't get the full sense in a survey as you do from an actual conversation.
Correct.
And I will also say this, like, even for ourselves, like, I kind of want to now tie it back into our own themes because, one of the big focuses I want to have is being able to talk about our own experiences.
Mhm.
I want you to kind of share a little bit about your experiences with product market fit because I know you've, through the transitions of the companies, through the transitions of algorithms and yada, 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 you've seen product market fits affect in the marketing industry. So I'm curious if you could just talk briefly on kind of your own personal experience of like what that's like, and how the market's changed compared to the products that were being offered, right? The services that were being offered.
Right. Well, when I started 7 years ago, there was social media had just begun.
As being popular, yeah.
I mean, it was
It'd been around for a while.
yeah, but it was still very much in its infancy.
Everyone had a Facebook by 2015, 2016.
But that's what I'm saying. Is people had Facebook, but nobody knew anything about it. I don't know that there were even ads for it or
There were ads back then. It was very low level.
Very low level.
It was very new age.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so in those days, being on Google was the thing. That was the only option really for advertising your company in a digital manner.
Yep.
Now we have what? We have X, not used to,
Yeah, X.
formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram,
TikTok. Technically, you have Pinterest, theoretically.
Pinterest.
You also would be able to include in there Clubhouse, kind of.
Yeah, Clubhouse is.
And then I don't know if you would include. They're still around, but I don't know if you would include the other one. Rumble is the other one that's kind of gained a little steam. They're not really that big. And then you've got I'm trying to think of that one with all the chats. I don't know if you would count that as a social media platform.
But anyhow, my point is that you've got 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Different ways for people to connect. With LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
About LinkedIn. But
YouTube, theoretically.
Yeah, and you've got all these things, maybe 10 different things that have come out.
Yep.
As other ways to reach people. And the problem with the social media stuff is what I've seen is that by the time you get to the place where you kind of understand who's there and who's going to benefit from it from a marketing standpoint, it's already saturated.
Nowadays, yeah.
And now, by the time you really kind of understand how it works and what it is and who's on it, now all of a sudden we're at saturation.
Yeah.
And the value drops.
Yeah.
Just like AdWords. Used to be 5 to 10 cents you could find AdWords out there. Now you'd be hard pressed to find a keyword that you can buy for 10 cents.
I don't think there is such a thing. I'm pretty sure $1 is the minimum now.
Pretty close. I think 50 or something, 50%. But still, you've got to sell a lot more. You've got to buy a lot more and spend a lot more to get it, to justify it. And in a lot of cases, it's just not valuable.
Well, I meant more of just like you're giving more of a history lesson. What I meant was more of just your own personal experience. Right.
As far as me personally, what I've used?
No, as far as what you've seen and experienced. As far as, I think when you first started 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, excuse me, I think from my experience at least, like I wasn't in your business, but like from my understanding of what you shared, there was a decent amount of interest for websites. Right. And there was a good amount of interest for websites that ranked on Google.
Right. Because that's all there was. That's what I'm saying. Is there wasn't any
right.
But
what I'm saying is that nowadays I don't think you see the same interest level.
No, you don't.
There's so many pre-built websites or easy to build template websites that people don't care, nor do they need someone to support them in building a website the same as it used to be. Because a lot of this template website stuff did not exist 7 years ago.
Correct.
Not to the mass consumers like Shopify was not like they may have been a thing, but they were not popular 7 years ago.
Not as popular, no. But yes, there's a lot of things that have come along to make it easier.
And so I'm just saying, like, for yourself, you've seen the demand where it was really high or relatively high, and you've seen it drop year over year as more and more things come out to be able to build a website for you, and the cost to be able to rank on Google gets higher and higher.
Correct. So you have the cost of Google going up to be found, and at the same time, you've got the ability to do it yourself
Yep.
rising, and it just has made for a very tumultuous time. And in many ways, we're kind of in a transition.
Sure.
And the question is what is the best option for that transition? And I think the bottom line is business market research. It's
Well-
really sitting down and finding those people who are open-minded enough to say, well, first of all, success isn't necessarily success. It's not all that it is. There's a lot of people, I had success. I sold some, or I sold as many as I wanted to sell of whatever it is. And now all of a sudden, well, we're good. We're fine. We've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And they really don't have it all figured out. And
Well, I mean,
and so they
but
either
if I want
hack
to talk
their
about,
customer or they
well, I mean, I can talk about even like my own introduction in the last
Okay.
year and a half, right? So, I mean, a year and a half ago, I was like, okay, well, we've got the websites and we've done some Google ad management, YouTube ad management. We'll just continue down that road, right? Thinking that there was demand for that kind of stuff, right? We've already gotten it. Obviously, there's demand to expand that. But as I started, exploring and meeting with these business owners and talking to them, I started to realize that's not really the future that a lot of people are looking into, right?
Correct.
Like they're looking to internally hire someone to do that versus externally hiring the company to do that.
Right.
Because they think there's value in the internal aspects of control and everything.
Well, that and it's easy and everybody can do it and anybody can do it and there's nothing to do it.
Well, it's become with YouTube and the educational stuff that each of those platforms have, there's a belief that anyone can learn it with a little bit of time,
Right.
which is relatively accurate. I mean, to a large
It's
degree.
accurate on one hand. On the other hand, there is a lot of things that are just
Well, to do basic level, to do good enough for what that company cares about, right? And I'll get back to my point on that in a second. But then I started looking at like, okay, let's focus on the automation piece, right? The emails, the text messages, how can we automate their sales process? Because in reality, a lot of businesses have been working on this lead generation stuff for, last 5-6 years, and it's proven to not turn into sales because lead generation does not equate to sales.
correct.
It just equates to people somewhat interested.
Well, you have a larger basket of people and you have more leads that your salespeople can throw away.
Yeah.
Rather than actually making sure that you have a sales process that's effective first and then adding more leads.
Yeah. And so I thought, like, well, there's an issue there. People haven't built that system out. They haven't really built that sales funnel out. They haven't really had that conversation on how do we convert people into sales that aren't immediate sales? How do we ensure that there's a process for that? And so I thought, well, that would be an interesting way to go about it, and there's a need for it, right? But the more I talk to people, the more I realize people don't see it as a need,
Right.
or an individualized need that they care about.
Right.
Right. And so I'm sure there are people out there that do, but the group of people that I'm running into in the events I'm going to, that's not a need that they personally see and perceive.
Yeah.
And so we transitioned again into kind of, well, maybe we're marketing consultants. Maybe that's just what we need to sell is marketing consulting. And marketing consulting, while it did get interest from people, there's kind of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, in my experience of the people I talk to, of just like, marketing consultants are going to tell me how to spend my money with zero experience and zero knowledge and zero proof of ROI and yada, yada, yada. And there's just, why would I waste my money on a consultant? I can do the same job with, with everything out there. I can do a good enough job to throw my money away.
Right. I can waste my money myself just as well as they can.
Yeah. And so, and to me, the biggest thing I saw there wasn't that people didn't see a value in having someone give input. It was that they didn't want the input on marketing specifically. They didn't view that as something that a marketing consultant could solve. And so we're now on the, what is that, third or fourth iteration now of focusing on product market fit. which is really marketing consulting, but it's geared much more around the market research and much heavier focused on helping clients with that market research end of stuff to figure out, do we need to adjust the product? Do we need to adjust the labeling? Do we need to adjust the messaging? And then what does that look like rather than it be, because a lot of, I mean, in my experience, the thing I've seen is most entrepreneurs, I shouldn't say most, but a decent number of entrepreneurs are scared to have those questions with their potential customers and customers.
Yes.
They'll send out a survey in a heartbeat. It's amazing me. They'll send out a survey in a heartbeat and ask those questions, but calling people up, having the questions during the demos, it's really hard for them for some reason.
Yes. Yes. Because
there's this fear of I'm going to lose a customer if I have that conversation.
Right. And they're not.
Yeah. And so being able to, I think, A, help come up with the questions, but B, being willing to be there and stand by them to have those conversations is something that they see value in, right? They can focus on the selling, and we can focus on that, well, what do you think? What, yada, yada, yada. And having those real conversations to gain that data to really know what the consumers care about. And then building out elsewhere. But all of that has been transitions of, we see a need, and then we go, does the market see the same need? And would the market be willing to pay to solve that need? And the answer is yes or no. If the answer is no, then you go to the next iteration, the next iteration. And that's, I want to throw it out there because that's how every business should be looking at it.
Yes.
Is that your market's going to change what they care about and what they want and what they feel like is needed. And you have to figure out what it is that they see value in and adjust.
Yes. It's an eternal adjustment, even when you have it right.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Kmart. Kmart was the Walmart of the world at one time. I remember when Kmart came to my little town, and it was like the biggest thing in the world that we were going to get a Kmart. I mean, it was just earth-shaking. And somehow Kmart just kind of isn't for the most part anymore.
Yeah.
No. And I saw Walmart take over and some other ones in between the two.
Yep.
But, they each rose and then they kept following the same people instead of adjusting and trying new things.
Yeah. Well, you look at Amazon, and Amazon did something that technically everyone could have done. Like, there's nothing that stopped Walmart from doing what Amazon did. No. There's no proprietary software tech that Amazon created that was so incredibly unique that Walmart couldn't have created themselves. There was nothing shipping or logistics-wise that Walmart couldn't have created. But Walmart did it, and therefore Amazon won out.
Right.
And Amazon turned into something that no one thought it would turn into.
Right.
It goes back to, even with Apple, right? And I think Apple's a slightly different story, but I think you could even talk to the point of Apple filled a need in the market that people didn't know they needed.
Well, they created a need.
Okay. With the Macintosh or with the iPhone? I'm thinking with the Macintosh.
All of it.
Okay.
At every point. Think about it. So their first computer was the Macintosh. No, second computer, because Apple IIe.
Okay.
That was character based.
Okay.
All the accountants bought Apple IIes because they had a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Okay. That was a market. That was huge.
So they found a market that needed
that, and they bought it, and they paid the outrageous prices for it.
Okay.
Then the next market was the Macintosh.
Okay.
Is that we were going to do the same thing we did with your Apple IIe, except we were going to give you a mouse and give you a graphical interface and make it easier to use it.
Okay.
Okay? More of a consumer product than a business product. Remember, they're selling to an accountant. That's
right.
Who's buying their original computer. Now they're moving into a more of a consumer-focused computer. The other one did some consumer-focused stuff, but that really wasn't the market that really carried them.
It was the extras that were nice, not the hard blood. Yep.
So you have the Macintosh, and then they did really well, and then they got rid of Jobs.
Okay. Yep.
Okay? Because they wanted to take on IBM and Microsoft and all of that.
Yep.
and they had these dreams, but not understanding, again, who their market is, why their market's buying. And they shrunk.
Yep.
So Jobs comes back, and he says, there's all these people go out there jogging. Jogging is really big. And they've all got cassette players taped to their arms.
I remember that. Or like on the
On the
shorts. Yep.
Yeah. And, it's big, it's heavy, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why don't we put that in a device that's small and light?
Yeah.
That they can carry around for the joggers. So they came out with the iPod for the joggers.
Yeah.
So what happened when they came out with the iPod for the joggers? A bunch of other people said, hey, it'd be cool to be able to carry that around. In fact, you know what? That fits in my pocket.
Yeah.
Can you imagine such a thing? It fits in my pocket. I take my songs with me, and it fits in my pocket. I don't have to carry a bunch of cassette tapes. I don't have to be limited to one cassette tape.
Yep.
I take hours and hours of stuff in my pocket.
Yep.
Then they came out with the iPhone. Why would we need an iPhone? I mean, who needs something that's got a graphical interface on it and you swipe and everything? And we flip them open. I mean, they're just fine. You flip them open, you type your thing, you make your call, everything's good.
And for everyone not old enough to remember what that life was like back then, that was like 2G internet, I want to say, or like,
Well, 2G and 3G.
I think it was 2G
No,
internet.
it was 2G initially for voice, and then they added 3G because they wanted to do some graphical type stuff.
I just remember
on the phone.
I just remember seeing the iPhone and like it was like a cool thing, but it wasn't, and it was like slow as all get out.
Yeah.
Like any interaction with it was
Yeah.
just slow.
Yeah. But they were bringing out 3G, and so they were kind of getting on the cutting edge of that. But nobody really cared because we all had our phones, which worked just fine. I mean, they rang. You could carry it around with you. I mean,
All you needed a phone.
The fact that you could carry a phone with you was just impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember having a bag phone in it, and it was a cool thing for a little while. It was money and all that,
but you needed the phone. And I just want to make this differentiation because I want to make it a little bit further ahead. They needed the phone to make calls and receive calls.
Correct.
And that's it.
That's right.
That was the purpose of your phone.
That's what a phone is.
Yes.
It's something to make calls and receive calls. And Apple said, no, look, not only can you make calls and receive calls, but you put your iPod
music
on it. You can play your music on it. And we're going to give you the ability to write apps for this stuff.
Yep.
So you can do other things that we can't think of right now, but here's a couple of things.
Right.
And meanwhile, back at the ranch.
And they had maps. Were maps on the first iPhone? Do you remember?
No.
I don't remember when they put
No, there's no map, there's no navigation. That didn't come out till much later. But the fact was is that you could.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was great. So so I can play my music on this thing, and I can carry it with me, and I can have like internet, like even the internet was in its infancy at
Very
that
much
time.
so. Yeah.
So I mean, I think Google existed at that time, and a couple other things, but everybody was still trying to figure out what was a browser was, what browser should we use, all that kind of stuff, how a browser was supposed to work.
Right.
Those things were all being worked out, and the phone companies had this problem of they had new technology. They moved from what was actually a 1G to 2G, which was great for voice, but it wasn't fast enough for graphics.
Right.
And now that we had this iPhone thing, it'd be nice to be able to do a little bit of data, and the internet's kind of out there, so maybe we could connect it to the internet for some things, right?
Right.
And so they had 3G.
Right.
And 3G was just
I remember
fantastic.
3G just took the iPhone to being usable.
Well, it was 300 kilobits. not megabits per second, 300 kilobits.
I can
300,000.
appreciate it, but I can't really appreciate it because
Okay.
I remember
What-
hating my 3G phone.
Well,
I remember thinking it was a waste of literally you would like have the YouTube video and you would have to like pause it and wait for the YouTube video to wait like 10 minutes.
Okay.
It felt like for the YouTube video to load and then you could press play to watch
okay,
it.
but you have to understand what to compare it to. Dial-up internet, which most of the country still had at that time,
But thankfully
was-
we only had that for a very short
was
period of my childhood.
only 1 kilobit.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
right.
Even the fastest modems only worked at about 6 kilobits, and you got 300.
Yeah, no, I
Be-
get it.
Be happy.
Huge
Be
difference.
grateful. Incredible speed. Right?
That's how it was. No, that's how it felt. I just
Right.
like looking back after having lived with
Yeah.
4Gs and
Right,
5Gs
right.
for so long. I'm
But-
just like,
But the technology wasn't there on the phone side
Yep.
to get the data fast enough. And it wasn't until 4G came out that the iPhone really all
That's
of a
when it
sudden
really blew me.
made sense, because now I've got speeds that I can actually almost kind of operate websites.
Yep.
And that makes sense. And I've now got enough apps doing different things. And now that they can talk faster over the internet, there's actually interactive visual things that
Yep.
you can do.
no, yeah, absolutely. I remember 4G was like the big thing.
And so my point is that the iPhone in many ways was just a way to carry around originally to have instead of buying a separate device to go jogging with, now you
Yeah.
take your phone with you. See? And it can carry all your songs
Yep.
and your stuff, and you can have some apps for whatever things you might do.
Right. Whatever handful of stuff.
Yeah.
It is very limited back then.
Yeah. And then, you got into the thing of the apps where, I know you had the one app where you were interested in guns and it would disassemble guns
Yep.
and show you the explosions of them. So you could download the app and get all the data on the phone, and then you could do all the cool stuff with it. But it's as those things came along that all of a sudden people said, oh, well, I have a need for that. Oh, I have a need for that. And now it's like, well, why would you have a home phone?
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to have a cell phone, first of all. I'm not going to have a home phone. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
And then I'm going to carry it with me. And I've got apps for all the various things I want, including navigation, right?
Yep.
Navigation was a big thing. That was, it was a pay as you go thing.
Well, it used to be because I remember DJ bought it for us years ago. We had the MapQuest
Yeah.
device, and there was like MapQuest, or I think it was MapQuest. There was like Garmin, and then like one other brand.
Yeah.
That made these like GPS devices.
Yeah.
And you got the maps, but you had to pay to get the new maps. So as new roads were built or roads were changed, you had to pay to get a new map
Correct.
on it.
And then eventually,
And it was
Google moved
ridiculous.
into that space and
Yep.
said, oh, it should just be free.
Well, Google built an app for it, is what changed.
Yeah,
Is
but-
they went from being desktop only, because they had desktop only
Right.
for
Well,
a long time.
yeah, well, because you only had
I remember when we
3G.
used to print off the
Instruction.
Google Map instruction.
Yeah, and how to get there. Yeah.
To go to like different people's houses, we'd be printing off the Google Map instruction.
I mean, those are the good old days.
It's crazy to think about nowadays. It's just like
Now
The
you
world's
carry,
changed.
now you carry your phone with you.
when you carry your phone with you, you just
But-
put on. I don't know where I'm going. I just
Right. So things expanded.
Yep.
Because we could now do it. You know what I'm saying? And as you added apps, you brought in new customers.
right.
Because I want to use that app. I want to have access to that. And so I have to have a phone now.
But see, to what you're saying, and I want to bring this full circle to what I wanted to talk about, to kind of a lot about product market fit, and one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation. What you're talking about, though, Apple relied on other people to have the success they had.
To a degree.
To a large
They
degree.
came out with an idea for a specific
As far
Group.
as if the developers,
specific
right.
group.
But if developers had never developed the apps, iPhone probably never would have taken off. the
Correct.
way it did.
Right. iPhone would still be competing with flip
But they
phones.
created a place and an opportunity, and they sold it in a way really to developers first. I mean, they had to get developers who want to develop for it. That allowed it to take off and become I need this. Because I can get this app on my phone, I can't get on desktop. Because I remember that happening when I got the iPhone 2. And granted, I had it in like 2012, right? You know, years after
Right.
it had come out. But I remember having the iPhone 2, and like there were certain apps that I couldn't get on my desktop that were on it, and vice versa. And it created this requirement of the phone to play those apps. I mean, I had an iPad Mini that I bought for that exact same reason. There were certain apps that like I couldn't play anywhere else, and I wanted to play them, so I had the iPad Mini to play them on.
Right. So my point is that that's what causes all that.
Right.
Is that they went after a specific market, and then they kept looking for new people that they could bring in.
Yeah.
And part of it was the apps brought some people in for free, which is always nice.
Yep.
But if you look at Apple's marketing, it changed over the years
Yeah.
to where it's talking to these new markets.
Right. Well, I think
So where the accountants were the Apple IIe, the accountants were the market for that. Okay?
Right.
I mean, every accounting firm had to have one. They had to have one for each person.
Right.
Okay? And that made them a business computer of sorts.
Right.
Okay? Then moving from that into the consumer area, moving from the consumer area back into.
Right. I want to say two things real quick. Yeah, and there were two things I wanted to get off. Number one, product market fit is about understanding your market to a degree. And a great example that I always like to point to is Rockefeller with the oil lamps.
Right.
Is he saw oil was no longer a popularized usage. I don't know what all the uses were, but it was dying down in demand. And so he realized that these oil lamps would cause people to need more oil. And so therefore he sold oil lamps and marketed oil lamps and created an oil lamp company just so that they would buy the oil lamp and have to buy his oil. Right? That was understanding your market's changed. What's your market need now? Okay, I'm going to create that and still use this raw resource to supply that. Which to me was just ingenious. And then same thing with cars. When cars started coming around, he was a big proponent of them because it, again, used his oil.
Yeah. And I think the only oil lamps at that time were blubber, whale blubber or something like that.
I'm not sure. I just know it was an interesting logic that he literally built a oil lamp company just to basically ensure that oil maintained in high demand.
Right. Well, found a new market.
Yep.
To create a new market for the product he had.
But my point is that there's basics. Everything that someone buys, there's the basic usage, right? I buy lettuce because I want lettuce in my diet. I buy a coffee because I want caffeine to wake me up. There's like core usage, A to B mindsets,
Yes.
right? But then there's all the other elements that can make someone value it greater or not value it greater, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I want to get from point A to point B. That's a simplistic value. But I want to get to point A to point B by being able to avoid all the tolls in Chicago. Well, now that's an added value that applies if I live near Chicago or near a toll road.
Right.
And so it's understanding your consumer's core value or core reason to buy, and then all the other elements to that, and why that core reason exists. Because there's some people who do buy lettuce because of the core reason of, I just know I should be eating more lettuce. Excuse me. But there's others who buy it because they know they should be dieting. Or they buy it because they know of some other health nutrient value.
Right.
And so it's understanding why consumers are buying it. Like what got them to the point of like, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
To your point with phones, if your purpose is still just to make calls and receive calls, realistically a flip phone's all you need.
Yep.
We've as a society grown to believe that you need more than that out of your phone. You need to be able to have instantaneous map locations and instantaneous other app usages that we have, right? Entertainment apps, etc. But at the end of the day, like, that's because you value entertainment, not you value the phone to make calls and receive calls. That's a secondary value now.
Correct. That's been attached to the phone that never existed before.
Right.
That people had to be educated that they wanted.
Yep, exactly. And so I don't know. I just throw all that out just to say, like, understanding your market and where your market's going will allow you to adjust to meet the demand that's there.
Correct.
And demand will change. And product market knowledge and research and associations is crucial
Well,
if you're going to
yeah.
if you're going to actually deliver a message that's going to work.
Well, that's why we keep saying that product market fit is one of those eternal things that every business needs to be working on, because it's not that you don't have enough business to do what you're doing today. The question is first of all, are you growing? Are you going to be actually a big business, or are you going to just keep having a job?
Yep.
You know, and if you're going to move from having a job to having a business that runs itself, then guess what? Whatever it is that you're doing is not going to be done in a certain amount of time. Eventually, there'll be somebody else with a cheaper, faster, quicker way of doing it. And if you're not aware of those things, you could have this great nest egg that's generated huge amounts of money for you for years.
Yep.
All of a sudden disappear overnight. Or at least it looks like it disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
It actually has been disappearing for a while. If you're not doing product market fit. You're not out there saying, hey, who needs this? Why am I buying it? Especially in the B2B space. The worst thing is that a lot of times I'm a supplier to another company. Well, what happens if that company goes out of business? What happens if that company isn't doing well? Well, I should be looking for other places to sell what I do. If I don't, I wait till that business goes out of business. Now all of a sudden my business is down by 50%.
And I'm out. Yeah, we've seen that happen a lot in the Detroit industry when the car market dropped, because we saw a lot of car part companies go from
a lot
they
of
were
local
making good to,
a lot of local part manufacturing went to China, and then when we were there, it was in the process of coming back from China.